Hey there, I am back for another installment of my small group engagement series. If this is your first time here, if you clicked on this on Pinterest and you're arriving at my website for the first time, I am Stephanie. I am an elementary school teacher, primarily a second grade teacher, who has taught for the past 8 years, but is taking a little break this year to be a stay-at-home mom. I have 2 toddlers that keep me very busy, and childcare is very expensive. So I'm home with them right now, but it's just a temporary thing. And I use this website to collect some of my favorite lessons and teaching ideas and strategies for simplifying the teaching process and making everything a little bit more effective. Mostly so that I have it all gathered in one place so that when I go back to the classroom, I know that I didn't forget anything that I used to do, but also to share with other teachers because I like to teach, I like to share, and this has given me my creative outlet for that while I'm home with my babies. But I have a series, so you'll want to go back and check out the first one. It's on Cooking Up Main Idea. It provides students a recipe for extracting the main idea out of a text by pulling ingredients out of the text, mixing them together, and you can use like a physical mixing bowl and dumping them out and baking the ideas together. And the ingredients are things like the title and repeated phrases, key details, things like that. And when you combine all those things together, you have one big main idea that the story is about. Today we're talking about cause and effect, and this one is not cooking themed because I wanted each lesson to be really different, to engage a multitude of student personalities and student interests. But this one is also very tactile, just like the Cooking Up Main Idea one was. It is a lesson centered around the structure of a house and kind of this big analogy to the structure of the story. So what I like to say is that when an author is writing a book, right? There are a lot of similarities to when someone is building a house. You have to start with the foundation. Now, in a story, the foundation, the thing that is holding that whole story up is the problem. And you're going to find the problem pretty early in the story. And I would say most well-written books, you're going to find the problem pretty quickly because that sets the stage for everything else that happens. Like, every behavior, every thought, every emotion that characters convey is in response to that main problem. Now, it could be that that main problem catapulted a relationship, a friendship between 2 people and their responses to each other as they're working to solve this problem, or cause and effect relationships. Everything comes from that main problem. It's the foundation of the story. You find it early because when the author wrote the book, he had to know, or she had to know, what that main problem was going to be pretty quickly so that the rest of the story could kind of fall into place. You have the solution is the roof. And when you're teaching this lesson, if you're doing this whole group first, you could glue these pieces on or draw these pieces on an anchor chart. These are kind of small for like a big anchor chart piece. But I have title pieces and words that you can cut out and glue onto an anchor chart. And then you would just kind of draw in the pieces of the house or glue these in if you want to blow them up really big, and fill them in when you're reading a book with your students. When you're doing this small group, your kids will have these pieces. You would want these sets for everybody so they can write in as they're reading the text with you the main solution or the main problem, and then save this. They can't put the roof on the house until they have the foundation and they have the walls, and then the roof can come last. But that's the thing that finishes off the house as well as finishes off the story. This creates all of the tension, all of the action, all of the behavior for the whole book. This polishes off the story and gives it a nice pretty bow, a nice happy ending. This in and of itself is a cause and effect relationship. And I certainly think that we should make that connection with our kids. That a book is one giant cause and effect relationship. It is the main problem, and the thing that solves it is the effect of this. This is causing this to happen, right? But in a good story, there's going to be all these bricks in the middle, all of these cause and effect relationships in between that build the story, and then the solution will come last. So your students will also, you can give them these little bricks and you can lay them out. Now, I have a pre-done graphic organizer. It just limits the number of cause and effect relationships that you can put in. But I mean, you could only pick like the main 4 from a book. But if you're reading a quick short story or a small group text that's not super dense, then maybe 4 is really all that you need. Your kids also will get this building materials sheet that tells them how to do this, kind of talks them through the steps. They could glue this into a reading notebook. You could print it a little bit smaller. But it tells them that your building materials are the conflict, major events of the story, clue words such as because, so, as a result of, and actions made by main characters. You're looking for those things when you're looking for cause and effect relationships in the story. And then the directions are, you're going to read the text first and foremost. So Bad Case of Stripes is a great one for cause and effect because it has a very clear problem right at the beginning of the story. You've got Camilla's getting ready for school. For some reason, the author tells us that she loves lima beans, and you're like, well, that's random, and that she never eats them because her friends hate lima beans. If you know this book already, you know that that's really a big hint into what causes her problem, the true main problem. But it's a little deep, I found, for second graders. So they typically recognize that the main problem is that Camilla is covered in stripes, which is a bad case of stripes. Everything that happens in this book, every cause and effect relationship that you see after that, is in relation to this. It's the foundation. So, the doctors can't figure out what's going on with her. She goes to school. The kids figure out that she has this condition. They start yelling out different words, and her body, her skin starts changing patterns and colors based on what they yell out. Cause and effect relationship, right? There's strong emotion happening here. You could tell, you feel embarrassed for her. There's conflict. There's stuff going on in the building materials that we were told to look for. You see it on that page. And you can have the kids, if you have Legos like this is a good tactile thing, to be like, what cause and effect relationship did you just see right there? What is something that happened that then made something else happen, right? And it's the kids were yelling out different patterns and colors, and Camilla's skin was changing. Stick it together. It's one thing causing another thing to happen. Is that related to our main problem that Camilla has a bad case of stripes and she can't get her skin to go back to the normal color? Well, yes, it is. Stick it on there. You could be doing this as the kids are filling in a graphic organizer like this. So it's very tactile for them. They're building the house. They're building the story. Or you can just have them be filling these in and laying them out almost like a puzzle on top of the foundation and then laying the roof on top when you get to the solution. Now, the structure of this story is you could pull out as many cause and effect relationships as you want in this book to build the story. And then you're going to get to the ultimate solution is that Camilla learns that she is true to herself and she goes back to normal. Because this book is one giant metaphor for when you care too much about what other people think and you listen too much to other people's opinions, you start to not be able to recognize yourself anymore. And that is a deep theme for second graders. So I've always had to kind of walk them through that concept and walk them through that idea. And some of them get it. Some of them are kind of like, what? Like lima beans? How is that related to what was going on? But I still love this book. I think it's a really good moral. I think there's really strong theme in this book. It's a great one used for theme, which is another small group lesson I'm cooking up. Some other straightforward ones are Chrysanthemum, right? Main problem. People are making fun of her name. She's embarrassed by it. A million cause and effect relationships happen throughout. She comes home crying. She has nightmares, all related to the main problem. And the solution is that everybody's favorite teacher has a crazy flower name like her, and then her name becomes the coolest name. So that one follows straightforward. Thank you, Mr. Falker. She cannot read. Bullying ensues. She's embarrassed to go to school. Her parents move. There are lots of different cause and effect relationships that are happening that are all related to that one main problem. And then the solution is she meets Mr. Falker and he teaches her how to read. Now, what I want to warn you about in this lesson is that not every story follows a straightforward cause and effect problem and solution structure. I'm thinking it's Valentine's Day this week, so I'm thinking specifically of Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch. That one has a main problem that's introduced. He's a lonely man, cause and effect relationships, and then a red herring solution where he gets a Valentine and it changes the trajectory of his life. And you think the problem is solved and that the rest of the book is just going to be about how much happier he is now that somebody loves him. But then that main problem circles back around when it turns out that Valentine was never for him and he feels lonely all over again and he goes back to his old way of living. And the solution comes, finally, solving that initial foundational problem. The solution comes when the neighborhood gathers together to throw him a party to show him how much they really love him. This is why, because not every book is cut and dry. Not every book is written the same way, thank goodness, or life would be very boring. Teaching would be very boring. It's why previewing the book, if you want to use a lesson like this, previewing the book first so you know what you're getting yourself into is valuable. And then also, if possible, doing a first read with the kids so that they just have like a bird's eye view of what's happening in the story before they have to go too deep with building the cause and effect relationships and deciding where the main problem is and when the solution comes. That you can use books that have more complex text structures. You just need to be prepared to walk the kids through that. Like, before we decided that's the solution, let's keep reading and see if anything else happens, because this is awfully early in the book for the solution to have shown up already. And I have this funny feeling that there is going to be more conflict that arises in this story before it's over. So that's just a little caveat about that, because not every story, not every picture book, certainly not every novel follows that straightforward path. But ultimately, if I could reduce the definition of any good story down, it is a problem happens and it inspires the characters in the book to work to solve it. In every story. Now, there may be multiple attempts to solve that problem. Some of them may work for a minute and then not. The way that they get to that end goal is different, but ultimately, every good story is going to have conflict and then a resolution. And that's what I want the kids to notice. I want them to notice that cause and effect relationships are not just these arbitrary things in a book where you feel like, all right, like he pushed her and then she got mad, cause and effect. Why did she push her? Or why did he push her? Why did she get mad about it? What's the main problem? Is the main problem the brother and sister cannot get along? Is that the main problem? Like, if you can tie it back to the main problem, if they can find that main problem, that foundation first, then cause and effect relationships become easier to see. They're not just blindly reading and pulling out when one thing made another happen. They're recognizing that the author used that conflict to create a bunch of mini conflicts, mini tension moments on the way to the solution. It makes the story interesting. It builds depth to the story. It keeps you going. So if the story were too easy to solve and there was no conflict along the way, then I don't know that we would enjoy reading as much as we do. But a good author is going to take you on a journey from the main problem to the solution. You're going to have a lot of moments that happen in between, and it's one thing causing another thing to happen, causing another thing, until eventually they solve it. So these materials, if you want to have your kids be physically building a story blueprint with cause and effect blocks, or if you want to just bypass the paper product and you just want to bring in some Duplo blocks and have your kids go to town, go for it. But I wanted to share this lesson with you. As I prefer with small group engagement lessons, I don't like to write a text to go with them. So this is text free, because I think that adds price. If I'm writing articles specifically for this lesson, I'm adding bulk to the product. I have to charge more for it, but it doesn't necessarily add value, because you may have a boxed curriculum you have to use. You may have a picture book you really wanted to teach for cause and effect, and now you can't because this lesson is too closely tied to some article that I wrote. So I like you to have the creative freedom to use the texts that you want to use, because I think if you love it, then your kids will feel that and they will love it. But I do like sharing the structure of these little lessons that I've used to give you some new creative ideas of how you could approach a skill that you may have kids struggling with in your classroom and you need a fresh approach, or you're getting ready to teach it for the first time and you're nervous about if you're going to teach it concisely enough to get the standard across. And yeah. So there are more of these coming. They're always like cooking up in my brain. Go back and watch the main idea one if you have not seen it, and visit my TPT store to see these materials for your purchase and download today. Thanks, guys. See you next time.